All right, so other than that, economically speaking, it is a more free system than what we'll see with socialism or communism. Not as much as free market or capitalism, but there is still a lot of private ownership. There's that profit motive. Um, there's property rights that exist. But because of that government oversight, that means there has to be a strong government in place. So, what we tend to see with fascism on the political side is a lot more strict than what we see on the economic side, right? So, we have to look at them separately in order to understand kind of the whole system, right? Which a lot of times is why when we hear of fascism, we think, okay, that's super controlling. It's got to be close to command. But if we're talking about the economy, the government doesn't control everything or most things. And so that's why it doesn't fit on that command side. Now, politically speaking, you will tend to see authoritarian governments. Now, not all authoritarian governments are fascist, but all fascist governments are authoritarian, right? So, what that means is that the government has the power, right? They are controlling most political things themselves, not everything. They're not totalitarian because they're not controlling everything. There wouldn't be economic freedom if they were um, totalitarian. So, authoritarian is the name that we give them, meaning they have pretty much no political opponents. They don't allow for that because that would be a challenge to the system. So once the group has power, they tend to hold on to that power and they tend to shut down a lot of political opposition. If you are questioning the government or you're like, I don't agree with that, there is no room for that. You're probably going to get jailed. As we've seen it applied, you're actually probably going to disappear or get murdered because there is no room for questioning them. Right? They want that control. One of the ways they're able to do that is through their propaganda. So, any of the news that comes out, the movies, radio shows, magazines, art that's being produced, the things that are allowed or not allowed socially, that all comes from the government, right? And so that has to be pre approved. And so you're going to see a lot of propaganda, right? The news isn't going to be totally honest because they're trying to make the government look the best. The movies are going to have things that push the social and cultural ideas that the government wants, right? So if it's something, again, that nationalism idea is here, right? If there's something about the culture that the government doesn't agree with, it won't be anywhere in the movies, on TV shows, on the radio and magazines. They won't allow for it to exist because they don't want to encourage it, right? And so when you hear the word fascist, right, that's usually what people are trying to use it as, meaning you are shutting down other ideas, you're shutting down people who are against you, and that's what we tend to see. Right. So a lot of propaganda, no political opposition. There's going to be one party. If you are involved in that party, you're going to be better off than people that are just working, that aren't really big politically, especially if you're not in the party, you're trying to be in a different party. You're definitely not going to benefit in the system. Usually, again, you'll probably get jailed or kicked out or killed. Um, but there's a lot of benefits from being higher up in the government or the military. You're going to have a lot of more wealth and opportunity there than if you're not. Now, there's also going to be a we call it a police state. So the police presence, the judicial system is going to be there again with this idea of nationalism and making sure that what's best for the country is what is pursued and followed through with. And that requires a strong police state. So there has to be somebody there monitoring everybody, right? You're monitoring the businesses, you're monitoring what consumers are doing, you're monitoring what people are doing when they get together. And that's why you can shut down that opposition. That's why you can do anything the government is wanting to do because there is a very strong police presence. Now, just because you have police existing in a state or in a country doesn't make it a police state. When the police are there cracking down on anything the government doesn't like, that makes them a police state, right? And they have to be there. They have to be a strong force in order to make sure that that nationalism, those national goals are being achieved, right? So economically, there's a lot more freedom than what there is politically. Now, it can seem like there's a lot of political freedom in most cases as an individual, not questioning the state. Your life is going to look pretty good, right? You're not really going to feel that oppression. Um, because as long as you're doing what's best for the state and you're following the laws, they're going to leave you alone. But in reality, there's not a lot of political freedom because you can't speak out against the government. You can't just pursue anything that you want. If there are elections, there's only one party. Maybe there's only one person for each position. So you may be voting, but if you don't have a choice in who you're picking, you don't really have political freedom, right? And so it can look kind of like a facade here. So the only examples of fascism, like I said at the beginning, we have would be Nazi Germany under Hitler and Italy under Mussolini during the 40s. Because of how horrible Hitler was, really countries don't try to pursue this anymore. Um, it doesn't make um, economically fascism the worst thing ever, but politically it tends to be pretty bad, especially when you are like Americans who come from a background of democracy and freedom for all. It does look really bad, but it doesn't have to be applied the way that Hitler applied it. Um, but that is um, fascism, what it looks like. Like I said, a lot of people use it incorrectly and say, oh, well, if the government criticized people protesting, that makes them fascist. But unless they're actually putting a stop to the criticism, they're not being fascist, right? Excuse me. Um, as long as there is the ability for people to speak their mind and not face any severe consequences for it, as long as they're doing it legally, um, it can't possibly be a fascist regime. Now, if the government is shutting down free speech or there are kicking out people because they don't agree with them, then you would probably be falling under the lines of fascist. All right, this ends the lesson. If you have questions, please email me. I will be glad to clear anything up that may not be clear after the videos. Otherwise, make sure you go back to the agenda and do what is left for today.